Before we begin, if you want to see more real-life horror, mysterious, and spine-chilling stories like this, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so that every new video comes straight to your phone. Now, let's dive into today's terrifying story.
I never thought silence could have weight, or shape, or intention, but what happened to me on Raven Creek Bridge that night changed everything I believed about sound, about fear, and about the thin invisible line between our world and something else that watches us from just beyond the edges of perception, something that waits for a moment when we are alone, tired, and too distracted to notice the rules shifting around us. My name doesn't really matter, because after everything that's happened, after the nights I've spent awake listening for even the faintest unnatural pause in the air, I don't feel like the same person I was before. But if you need to call me something, call me Daniel. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Central Oregon, and for the past 7 years I've been working as a night shift delivery driver for a regional logistics company that contracts with stores spread across small towns surrounding the Cascade forests. I've driven through snowstorms that looked like the world was being erased, thunderstorms that shook my truck like someone was slamming their fists on the roof, and fog so thick it felt like drifting through gauze. But none of those things frightened me. What frightened me most was what happened in the quiet. And the quiet on Raven Creek Bridge wasn't natural. It wasn't even silence the way we normally understand it, it was the absence of life itself, the absolute muting of the world, as if someone had pressed a cosmic mute button and everything living around me had obeyed. I remember the exact date, October 18, 2024. I was driving a late delivery route because one of our new guys called out sick last minute, and the dispatch asked if I could cover. The run was straightforward enough: pick up a sealed pallet from a distribution hub near Salem, take it down to a small outdoor equipment retailer in a town called Pineford, then cut across a series of forest roads to return to the main highway. The problem with those forest roads is that once you get past the logging areas and cell towers, the signal drops off. If something goes wrong, you're on your own until another vehicle passes by, which at that hour, between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., is rare. I wasn't nervous though, I'd driven those roads 100 times. Raven Creek Bridge was just another landmark, a narrow steel and concrete pass stretching over a gorge carved out by decades of glacial runoff. Locals said weird things happened there: strange lights, car batteries dying, hikers hearing whispers under the bridge. But every small town has its ghost stories, and I always chalked it up to bored rural imaginations. The night started off normal. I had a large coffee from a gas station near Silverton, my favorite late-night rock playlist, and the heater running just strong enough to keep my hands warm. Oregon nights in October can cut through layers of clothing, but inside the truck cabin everything felt cozy and predictable. The road curved through dense pine forests on both sides, the trees leaning inward like silent watchmen. The moon was bright enough to shine through the branches, flashing white against the windshield like blinking eyes. I was about 40 minutes from Pineford when I passed a wooden sign half lost in shadow that read Raven Creek for miles. I barely glanced at it. Just another mark I'd seen many times. What caught my attention wasn't the sign, it was the way the music on my radio cut out for half a second. Not faded. Not glitched. Cut. Like someone had sliced the audio with surgical precision. It came right back, but something about the interruption felt too clean, too perfect. I tapped the screen, checked for Bluetooth interference, but everything looked fine. A few minutes later, my headlights swept across the first guardrail of Raven Creek Bridge. Usually when you approach a gorge bridge in Oregon at night, you can hear the rush of water below. Even from the road. The creek is loud, always has been, roaring and crashing across rocks even in the dry season. But as I approached, the sound wasn't loud. It wasn't quiet. It simply wasn't there. I rolled the window down halfway to check. All I heard was the hum of my truck engine. No wind. No insects. No rustling trees. No distant running water. Nothing. The silence pressed against my ears like altitude pressure. I slowed down without meaning to. My eyes darted over the railings, expecting to see something blocking the creek, fallen logs, maybe, but the gorge looked normal. Moonlight glinted off the water. It was flowing, moving, crashing against rocks. But it made no sound. None. I shifted in my seat, shaking off a prickling sensation creeping up my spine. Something was wrong with this place tonight. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. When my truck reached the midpoint of the bridge, the engine sputtered once, coughed, and idled like it was about to stall. Then the headlights dimmed, not flickered, not flashed, dimmed smoothly like someone was slowly turning a dial. My dashboard lights faded too. My throat tightened. "Come on," I muttered. "Not now." I gave the truck a little gas. The engine responded, but sluggish, like it was struggling to pull air into itself. That's when I noticed movement ahead. At first I thought it was a deer crossing the road. Shadows shift strangely on bridges at night, especially with moonlight cutting sharp angles through the steel supports. But as the shape grew clearer, I realized it wasn't an animal. It wasn't walking like an animal. It was a person. A tall figure standing dead center in the lane about 60 feet ahead of me, facing sideways, unmoving. I hit the brakes, the truck slowed, and instinctively I honked. Except, there was no sound. My horn pressed in, my muscles pushed with force, but the air remained mute. The horn didn't break. The horn wasn't damaged. The sound simply did not exist. I held my breath. My heartbeat pounded in my eardrums because it was the only noise left in the world. Something about the figure felt wrong. Not dangerous yet, but wrong in a way I can't explain easily. The body was motionless in a rigid posture. The head was tilted slightly downward as if they were looking at the shadow beneath their feet. Their arms hung perfectly straight, not relaxed, not tense, just straight. I flashed my high beams. No reaction. I leaned forward, squinting to see details. The figure seemed to be wearing something dark, maybe a coat, though it was hard to tell in the low light. The strange part was the way the moonlight hit them. Everything else on the bridge had clear shadows, the guardrails, the steel beams, my truck, but this figure's shadow was faint, diffuse, like it was being stretched through fog. But there wasn't any fog. I turned the steering wheel a few degrees, intending to inch forward around them, when the figure slowly, very slowly, began to turn its head toward me. Just the head. The body remained perfectly still. The movement was so slow and controlled it reminded me of an owl adjusting its gaze. When its face finally oriented toward me, I felt something sharp and electric run down my back. I couldn't make out facial features. The moonlight struck the figure from behind, plunging its entire face into shadow, but I could feel its attention lock onto me with such intensity that it made the inside of the truck feel colder. I tapped the horn again out of reflex. Again, no sound. I swallowed hard, trying to shake the feeling squeezing my chest. "Hey!" I shouted through the window. My voice sounded small. Muffled. Like speaking under a blanket. The figure didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't breathe, not that I could hear. After a few seconds of growing dread, I shifted the truck into reverse. The moment I did, the figure's head snapped upright, not back, not forward, just upright. Like a puppet being yanked into position. I froze. The silence thickened. I eased my foot off the brake and the truck rolled back an inch. The figure took a step toward me. Not a normal step. A single smooth glide forward, as if the body had moved without lifting its feet. My breath hitched. I shifted back into drive instinctively. The figure stopped. It was still at least 40 feet away, but the tension had tightened the air so much it felt like a rope pulling me forward. I considered calling 911, but the moment I reached toward my phone, the screen glowed but displayed no signal, even though I should have had at least one bar on this stretch. The figure tilted its head again, slightly to the left this time, almost curious. Then, in the same impossibly slow motion as before, it began lifting its right arm. Inch by inch. Elbow unfolding like a broken hinge. Hand rising toward its face. I watched, unable to look away. When the hand reached the height of its cheek, it pointed one finger straight at me. Not threatening. Not trembling. Just pointing. My body reacted without my permission. I floored the gas. The truck jerked forward, engine whining like it was fighting invisible resistance. The figure stood still as I approached, but just before I reached the point where I would pass it, something impossible happened. The world blinked. Only for a fraction of a second. Like the entire setting dropped a frame. A single flicker of reality. In that flicker, the figure vanished. And reappeared an instant later, right beside my driver's side window. Close enough that if the glass hadn't been there, I could have touched it. My scream lodged in my throat. I didn't see a face. Only darkness where a face should be. But I felt eyes on me. Cold, heavy, focused. My headlights surged back to life in that moment, flooding the bridge with light. The engine roared like it had been freed from a chokehold. I slammed through the remainder of the bridge, heart racing, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't dare look in the mirrors. Not at the road. Not at the sides. Not at anything. When my tires hit the gravel at the end of the bridge, sound rushed back all at once, the wind, the creak, the rustle of trees, like someone released the world from behind soundproof glass. My radio blared suddenly loud, making me jump. My phone buzzed with missed signal warnings. My breath came out shaky and uneven. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Raven Creek Bridge stood quiet behind me. Empty. But the silence I had just escaped felt alive in my bloodstream, as if something had followed me off that bridge even if I couldn't see it. And I knew, deep inside, that this was only the beginning of whatever had noticed me that night. I kept driving long after the bridge was out of sight in my mirrors, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone completely white, and even though the forest had returned to its normal chorus of rustling branches and distant water running through the ravine, none of it sounded natural anymore, as if every noise had been placed there by something trying too hard to mimic normal life, like a person imitating breathing patterns because they've watched humans but don't actually understand them. The inside of the truck felt too warm, too cramped, and I rolled the window down just enough to let in the night air, hoping the cold would ground me. But the air that hit my face wasn't refreshing, it was stale, carrying an undercurrent of something metallic, like watered-down blood. I forced myself to focus on the road. Pineford was only 15 minutes away. Once I got to the store, I'd unload the pallet, get my paperwork signed, and maybe step inside for a few minutes where fluorescent lights and people would remind me that the world still made sense. My thoughts were spinning, replaying what happened on Raven Creek Bridge over and over again, trying to reason through it. Maybe there had been a chemical leak in the area, something that affected sound waves, some kind of environmental anomaly I didn't understand. Maybe the figure was a person in shock, someone who wandered onto the bridge and just froze. Maybe I hallucinated parts of it because of lack of sleep. But none of those explanations held. I hadn't been sleep deprived. The silence wasn't natural. The horn physically pressed down under my hand and still made no sound. And the way the figure moved, the glide, the snap of the head, the blink of disappearing and reappearing, no person could do that. My phone vibrated in the passenger seat, making me flinch so hard that the truck swerved slightly. I grabbed it quickly. 1 bar of signal had returned, blinking weakly like a dying firefly. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? Hi, I need an officer because a shadow person stood in the road and turned off the entire world. They'd test me for drugs or send me to a hospital. So I just placed the phone face down on the seat again and kept driving. The road dipped through a cluster of old Douglas fir trees that cast huge claw-like shadows across the pavement. My headlights stretched long shadows of branches that looked like reaching fingers. The cold metallic smell in the air faded slowly, replaced by the scent of pine and damp moss. I exhaled shakily. The world was normal again. Or pretending to be. When I finally pulled into Pineford, I felt an enormous, temporary wave of relief. The town was small, just a few hundred people, and most of it shut down by 10 p.m., but the outdoor equipment store I was delivering to kept a motion light system in the loading area. As soon as my truck rolled into the lot, bright white floodlights snapped on, bathing the entire back lot in sterile brightness. No shadows. No darkness. No silence. Human places feel different. You don't realize how safe they feel until you've been somewhere where the world bends wrong. Jay, the overnight receiver, was already outside, clipboard in hand, wearing his usual beanie and flannel jacket despite the cold. "You're late," he called out with a grin. "What happened, man? Fall asleep on the road?" I opened the door and stepped out, but my legs were trembling so badly that it took me longer than it should have to climb down. When my boots hit the concrete, I felt like someone who had just stepped off a boat after hours on rough water, stumbling, disoriented, unsure whether the ground beneath me was stable. "Long story," I muttered. Jay's smile faded a little. "You good? You look. I don't know, pale." I forced a laugh. "It's cold, man. Oregon in October." He didn't seem convinced, but he held his clipboard out anyway. "All right, let's get the paperwork going. I'll open the bay door." As he walked toward the warehouse door control panel, his footsteps echoed in the large open lot. Echoed normally. Echoes were comforting. I clung to them like a lifeline. While he rolled up the door, I walked to the back of my truck to unlock the pallet straps. My hands were still shaking, so I took a breath and closed my eyes for a second. But the moment my eyes were shut, I saw it. My mind replayed the exact instant the figure appeared beside my window. The darkness where its face should have been. The weight of its stare. My eyes snapped open again, and I swallowed hard. After unloading, Jay signed the delivery, thanked me, and joked again about me owing him a beer for being late. I managed a weak smile. Human interaction helped, but it didn't erase the dread sitting low in my stomach. I climbed back into the truck to start the return leg of the trip. But as soon as I turned the key, I noticed something on my windshield. A smear. No, not a smear, more like a streak, a faint long streak of cloudy residue across the glass. I reached forward and wiped my finger across it. The streak didn't feel like dirt or moisture. It felt slightly greasy. Like skin oil. Human touch. Except the streak began exactly where the figure had appeared beside my window on the bridge. My heart lurched. I scrubbed at the spot with my sleeve until my arm got tired. The mark never came off entirely, just faded enough to be less noticeable. I sat in the cabin for a full minute, staring at the forest beyond the lot, deciding whether or not to take the same route back. The fastest way home was across Raven Creek Bridge again. The long route, looping around through the highway, would add an extra 90 minutes. I didn't care about the time. I started toward the highway. I wasn't going back to that bridge. Not ever. But something had other plans. 5 minutes outside Pineford, the radio began crackling. Not the normal static you get in deep woods, this was sharp, irregular, like someone tapping on a microphone. Tap. Tap tap. Tap. Tap tap tap. The pattern was deliberate. A rhythm. Too intentional. I reached to turn the radio off, and the moment my fingers brushed the knob, the tapping stopped. The radio went dead silent. My headlights flickered once. The engine hesitated, but didn't stall. "Not again," I whispered. Please, not again. The road I was on wound along a steep drop on one side and a dense forest wall on the other. There wasn't anywhere to pull off safely. I drove faster, eyes flicking nervously between the road and the mirrors. That's when the smell hit, sharp, cold, metallic. The same scent from before the bridge. It filled the truck cabin like invisible smoke. I rolled down the window, gagging a little, but the outside air didn't help. The smell was inside the truck, not coming from outside. My heart slammed in my ribs so loudly I could hear it over the engine. A few seconds later, the cold started. Not outside, the cold came from the passenger seat. I glanced over. The seat was empty. Of course it was empty. But the leather indent, the imprint of weight, there was an outline on the seat cushion. As if someone invisible were sitting there. No. Not someone. Something. My chest tightened. My breathing became shallow and fast. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road. I didn't dare look back at the seat. I don't know how long the imprint stayed. 10 seconds? 30? It felt like eternity. Then, without warning, the cold vanished. The smell lifted. The radio hummed back to normal. But I didn't feel relief. I felt hunted. I drove faster. Trees blurred past in streaks. The turnoff to the highway was just ahead. I could see the reflective sign flashing under my headlights, until every dashboard light in my truck went black. The engine died. The steering wheel locked mid-turn. My headlights went out. Everything went out. The truck coasted silently in total darkness. My breath hitched. My fingers clenched the wheel. No, 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 and no, the truck rolled to a stop. Not on a straightaway. Not on a hill. On a narrow forest road with a steep drop on one side and nothing but trees on the other. I twisted the ignition frantically. Nothing. I grabbed my phone. Zero signal. I hit the flashlight. The beam came on shakily, illuminating the inside of the cabin with harsh white. My hands were trembling so badly the light jumped across the dashboard. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to breathe. It's okay, I whispered to myself. You're fine. The truck just died. It happens. You'll wait for another driver or a ranger. You're not on the bridge. You're safe. The forest outside was silent. Not the same absolute void as Raven Creek Bridge, but wrong. A thin blanket of quiet, like the forest was listening. Watching. Waiting. I decided I needed to get out and check under the hood. Maybe a battery cable had shaken loose. Maybe a fuse popped. Maybe, I froze. Behind me, directly behind me, on the rear window of the truck, something tapped. Not a branch. Not an animal. A finger. Slowly. Deliberately. Tap. 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 My entire body went cold. And before I could turn around, something whispered my name from the darkness outside the glass. Daniel. When I heard my name whispered from behind the truck, every muscle in my body locked into place so violently that for a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't blink, couldn't even think in a straight line, because the voice that spoke wasn't just outside, it was right against the glass, close enough that I felt the vibration of the sound through the cabin, and yet it was barely louder than breath. A whisper shaped with the precision of someone who knew exactly how my name rolled off my own tongue. When I said it, the exact tone, the exact rhythm, as if something had listened to me my entire life and was now practicing the human act of speaking. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream, but my vocal cords refused to work. I don't know how long I sat frozen like that, gripping my phone so tightly the flashlight beam trembled all over the dashboard, but each second stretched into something thick and heavy, like time itself didn't want to move. The tapping on the rear window resumed, tap, 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 slow and rhythmic, but now there was a faint scrape with each touch, like a fingernail dragging lightly across glass, and that sound, that delicate scraping, crawled under my skin in a way nothing else ever has, because it didn't sound angry or hostile, it sounded curious. Patient. Almost playful, like whatever was behind me had all the time in the world. My breath finally broke through in shallow gasps. I forced myself to turn, millimeter by millimeter, flashlight beam jittering over the passenger seat, the dashboard, the side window, and then the beam landed on the rear window. There was no face staring in. No silhouette. No figure at all. Just the empty dark forest behind the truck. But the glass, it wasn't clean. Not anymore. 5 long streaks smeared down the rear window from top to bottom. 5 marks that looked exactly like the trails left by fingers brushing across glass. I spun forward again, heart slamming so hard my vision pulsed. The forest outside the windshield was still. And silent, the trees unmoving, the road empty. I squeezed the flashlight until my knuckles burned and forced myself to breathe in counts, 4 in, 4 out, desperate to anchor myself to something. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But the greasy streak on the side window from earlier and these fresh marks on the rear glass told me one undeniable truth: it was real. Something was following me. Something was touching my truck. Something was whispering my name. I gathered every ounce of shaky courage I had and reached for the door handle. I had to get out. I had to check the hood. I had to do something, because staying inside while something circled the truck from the outside felt like being trapped in a coffin waiting to be opened. My fingers brushed the handle, and the voice came again. But this time it came from the passenger seat. "Daniel," I screamed so loudly my throat tore. The flashlight jerked toward the seat, but it was empty. Of course it was empty, but the indentation was back. The seat cushion sank as if someone invisible was sitting in it, leaning slightly forward, watching me. The pressure mark deepened slowly, like the weight was shifting closer. A cold wave radiated across the cabin from that spot, frosting the air so intensely that my breath fogged out in front of me. I fumbled for the door handle, but my hand slipped, my skin was slick with sweat. I grabbed again, pulled, shoved my shoulder into the door, stumbled out onto the road, and slammed the door shut behind me. Cold night air hit my face like a bucket of ice water, and for a brief moment, the world felt normal again, the trees rustling lightly, the distant sound of wind weaving through branches, my boot soles crunching gravel. But that moment lasted only a heartbeat. Because the instant I stepped around the front of the truck to reach the hood latch, everything stopped. Not slowed. Not softened. Stopped. The wind froze mid-rustle. The leaves halted mid-sway. Even the distant hum of insects vanished in an instant, replaced by a suffocating, thick silence I recognized too well, Raven Creek silence. My vision blurred. My knees weakened. "No," I whispered. "No, not here, not again." A thin shadow rippled across the surface of the truck hood, like a reflection passing by even though there was nothing around that could cast it. My heart dropped into my stomach. I forced myself to reach beneath the hood lip and pull the latch. The metal popped open with a click that echoed unnaturally loud in the dead air. My hands shook as I lifted the hood and pointed my flashlight into the engine bay. Everything looked normal. Battery cables in place. No steam. No leaking fluids. Nothing that would explain a sudden total shutdown. Then the metallic smell hit again, stronger this time. So strong I gagged. It didn't smell like blood anymore. It smelled like something dead. Something old. Something that had been rotting in the cold. I stumbled back, coughing, nearly dropping the flashlight. As I steadied myself, the beam swept across the trees on the right side of the road, and landed on something that froze my blood. A figure. Standing between 2 pines. Not moving. Facing me. Watching. My breath caught. The figure was tall. Too tall. Its head nearly brushed the lowest pine branch. The darkness around it felt thicker than normal, like the shadows clung to its outline. I raised the flashlight higher, trying to see its face, but the beam bent around the figure. As if the light couldn't touch it. As if it absorbed the light rather than reflected it. My heart pounded so violently that I felt my vision pulse again. And then, slowly, the figure tilted its head. Just like on the bridge. The exact same angle. The exact same slow, unnatural movement. I stumbled backward until my spine hit the grill of the truck, knocking the air out of me. The figure took a step. No sound. No crunch of leaves. No shift in shadows. It simply moved forward, gliding across the ground like gravity didn't apply to it. I scrambled along the side of the truck, my hands slipping on the cold metal, trying to reach the driver door again. The figure took another step. And another. The space between us shrank rapidly. I reached the door handle, pulled, the door didn't open. It was locked. I fumbled frantically for my keys, patting my pockets, breath coming in sharp, broken gasps. My fingers brushed the keys. I yanked them out, dropped them to the pavement with a metallic clatter. No, I dropped to my knees, hands sweeping across the gravel, searching blindly. The flashlight beam shook wildly, bouncing across the ground, across the truck tires, across the road, then across the figure's feet. It was only 10 feet away. Bare feet. Pale. Motionless. Filthy, like they had walked miles through wet soil. My fingers closed around the keys. I grabbed them, lunged upright, slammed the key into the lock. The moment it clicked open, the figure vanished. The beam of my flashlight hit nothing but empty road. My breath froze in my throat. I yanked the door open, dove inside, slammed it behind me, and hit the lock button repeatedly until my thumb hurt. The flashlight fell from my hand onto the passenger side floor. The seat indentation was gone. The cold spot was gone. But the smell, the metallic rot, seeped through the cabin like fog. I jammed the key into the ignition and twisted. The engine sputtered, once, twice, then roared to life. I floored the gas without looking back, tires skidding on gravel, engine screaming as I shot forward down the forest road. The trees passed in a blur. My hands shook uncontrollably. My breath came in ragged heaves. I didn't know where I was going, just away, anywhere away from that thing. After several minutes, I reached the turnoff for the highway. As soon as my tires hit the main road, the air shifted. The silence lifted. Sound returned. The world came back. But behind me, in the rearview mirror, for half a second, I saw a silhouette standing at the edge of the forest. Tall. Motionless. Head tilted. Watching me leave. And the worst part? I knew, with a certainty that crawled through my bones like ice, that it wasn't staying there. It wasn't bound to the bridge. It wasn't bound to the forest. It was following me. And it wasn't finished. I don't remember running, but I remember the panic that hollowed out my chest as I scrambled through the trees, branches clawing at my jacket while the forest grew darker with every step I took away from the bridge, as if the night itself thickened to swallow me. I don't remember breathing either. Everything felt mechanical, like my legs were moving without me, like survival had taken over and my consciousness was just being dragged along behind it. The only thing I could hear was my heartbeat, but even that felt wrong. It sounded like it was echoing from inside the trees instead of inside my chest. The phone in my pocket kept vibrating aggressively, but when I finally pulled it out, the screen was just flashing that same phrase in a black box over and over again: "This isn't for you." It didn't matter if I tried to close it, reboot it, or smash the screen, the words kept burning back through, like something was overriding everything. I don't know how long I ran before the forest opened into a clearing I recognized, the old maintenance access road the county hadn't used in years. The gravel felt strange under my feet, almost soft, like the ground wasn't solid. But the worst part was the wind. It wasn't blowing. Not even a little. Even high in the Oregon mountains, even in the dead of night, there's always the faint hiss of wind in the pines, always, but right there, in that clearing, it felt like someone had taken the world's volume knob and twisted it down to absolute zero again. And that silence, that unnatural, suffocating, absolute silence, was more terrifying than the figure in the headlights or the voice in my head or the shape crawling toward me on the bridge. Because by then, I understood something I didn't understand before: the silence wasn't an absence of sound, it was a presence. Something was in it. Something was creating it. Something that needed the world quiet so that it could move. When I reached the end of the access road and saw the county marker in the dark, the one with the rusted numbers and bullet dents, I broke down crying out of sheer relief. Civilization meant safety. Light meant safety. Noise meant safety. My breathing sounded normal again, my footsteps crunched like they should, even the distant hum of the highway felt comforting. For the first time since the bridge, I let myself believe that maybe I left whatever that thing was behind. Maybe I outran it. Maybe it couldn't leave the bridge. Maybe the silence was tied to that place. I was wrong. I realized that about 3 minutes later when I saw the glow of a street lamp come into view and stepped beneath it, because the moment I did, the light overhead flickered 3 times and then went dead, leaving me in complete darkness. And that impossible silence slammed down around me again. It didn't fade in gradually this time, it hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. My ears rang from the abruptness of it, and in that ring, I heard a second sound layered behind it, something slow and deliberate, like the dragging inhale of something breathing in a space too big for lungs. I froze. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Something deep inside me knew that turning around would be the biggest mistake of my life. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket again. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to see another message written by something that shouldn't be able to type. But the buzzing got stronger, more urgent, until the phone felt hot in my pocket, like it would burn through the fabric. So, with shaking hands, I pulled it out. The screen wasn't black this time. It wasn't a message. It was the camera. But the camera wasn't facing outward, it was in selfie mode. And in the live image on the screen, I saw myself standing under the dead street lamp, my face pale, my eyes shaking, and behind me, maybe 3 or 4 feet back, there was an outline human-shaped, almost, but stretched wrong, like someone had taken a person and pulled the silhouette vertically. Its head hovered far above mine. Its arms hung too low. And its entire body was vibrating slightly, like it didn't fully exist in this layer of reality. But the worst part wasn't the shape. It was the eyes. 2 perfect circles of white, glowing like they were reflecting light from somewhere that didn't exist. And in the reflection of those eyes, I could see the bridge behind me, even though I was miles away. Raven Creek Bridge. Its railings broken. Its asphalt cracked. Its darkness alive. I dropped the phone on instinct, but because of the silence, it didn't make a sound when it hit the ground. Not even a crack. Not even a thud. That was when I felt the air change behind me, a shift in pressure, like something massive had leaned forward without touching me, like it was bending reality just by being close. And then, right beside my left ear, I heard the first real sound since the truck stalled on the bridge. A whisper. A faint, unnatural whisper that didn't sound like a voice at all. It sounded like the absence of a voice, like breath being shaped into words by something that had never spoken before. And the whisper said, "You weren't supposed to leave." My legs buckled. For a moment, I couldn't even scream because the silence swallowed it. Then the street lamp above me flickered back on abruptly, blasting the clearing with bright yellow light, and the silence broke like shattering glass. Every sound returned too quickly, too violently, the wind roaring through the pines, my scream tearing from my throat, the echo of the light buzzing overhead. And when I spun around, the space behind me was empty. Completely empty. No figure. No glowing eyes. No impossible outline. Just the old gravel road, the night sky, and the trees swaying in the wind like normal. That I didn't stop running until I reached my car, parked crookedly at the bottom of the access road from when I left it in a panic earlier. I jumped in, locked the doors, and didn't even try to start the engine. I just curled into the driver's seat and sobbed until exhaustion forced my body to shut down. When I woke up, it was morning. Birds were chirping. The sunlight looked normal. Everything looked normal. My phone lay outside where I dropped it, screen cracked but still working. The selfie image was gone. The messages were gone. Everything from that night had been wiped clean except for one new notification, a saved audio file with no timestamp and no sender. The file name was just a single word: listen. My whole body shook as I hesitated, thumb hovering over the play button, but I needed to know if it was proof. If any of it was real. When I finally tapped play, I expected silence, or maybe the whisper, or the voice, or the static from the bridge. But what I heard instead was worse. It was my voice. From the night before. Except I wasn't speaking. I was screaming. Screaming and begging. Begging something to let me go. Begging something not to take me. Begging something not to silence me. But none of those things happened while I was awake. None of that happened on the bridge. Or in the woods. Or under the street lamp. I never screamed like that. But the recording kept going, and near the end, buried deep under my own screams, I heard the whisper again, clearer this time, almost like it was learning how to speak: I am not done with you. I left Oregon that same day. I quit my job. Moved states. Changed everything. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving alone and the highway gets too quiet, the wind fades for just a moment. The world flickers. And a cold wave washes over me, the exact cold I felt on Raven Creek Bridge. And in that stillness, that thin slice of dead silence, I swear I can hear someone standing just behind me, breathing in a rhythm that doesn't belong to anything human. I don't ever look in the mirror when that happens. I don't touch my phone. I don't slow down. Because deep down, I know the truth: the silence didn't belong to the bridge. It belongs to me now. And one night, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, the world around me will go silent again. Completely, utterly, impossibly silent. And when it does, I know I won't be able to run a second time. Thank you so much for watching the entire video. And to get more videos like this, please like and subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon beside it. Thank you.